We've all heard about Western volunteers fighting for Ukraine, but that's not all. There's volunteers from dozens of other countries, and we are going to be breaking down some of them right now. Let's get into it. And we're going to also be looking at some tattoos and patches, and there might be a thing or two to learn. Stay tuned. This is interesting. That looks like some sort of Mark 19 variant. Like, these are big grenade rounds, but that's not the end to a Mark 19. Yeah, you can see that there's some issues there where this thing's kicking up onto its back legs of the tripod. This wants to be weighted down like a sandbag or something, I think. And to the YouTube censors, guys, this is obviously a training event. This is on a range. They're documenting training. Don't demonetize me. And also, if you're a fan and you want me to do the breakdowns of the combat videos that YouTube definitely won't let me show you, you want to check out the Patreon. It's the link is always in the description, and you get obviously a weekly video where I do 3 or 4 of breakdowns of viral combat videos, plus an exclusive room on the Discord, and Lieutenant tier patrons get the shout out. Okay, now pay attention, because a lot of these guys have the Ukraine Armed Forces patch, right? But then they also have other patches that sometimes will let you identify where they are from. Okay, so this looks like maybe some sort of morale patch. I'm seeing 2 crossed swords. I think that's actually the patch for this unit, the Carpathian Sith. And let's see if we can look it up. The Carpathian Sith Battalion, or the Sich Battalion. You guys can see here, there's their symbol, 2 crossed swords, a very angry looking Cossack type of guy. And they've been around since 2014 as a volunteer unit, actually with the special police unit is how they're designated. Though I think most special police units in this day and age, in this era of the conflict, have been retasks as light infantry units. Okay. I also want to point out, it doesn't look like this guy has a back plate, which is troubling, or side plates in his plate carrier, which, don't get me wrong, I get it. It's heavy and annoying in your training, but, you know, you should generally just get used to wearing the plate carrier with the plates in it. So this is what you may be like, hey, they're not really firing at targets. What they're doing is what's called FAM fire, familiarization fire. And this is a unit made up of people from many, many different militaries. And what you often get is different arsenals and different training. For example, I was trained by the US military. I never used an RPG before. And so I would need training, at least familiarization, on how to engage targets with an RPG. I imagine it's similar broadly to an AT4, but the actual hold position, firing position, etc., seems very, very different.
Їх участь в нас, її переоцінити дуже складно. Це дуже важливо мати таких людей. Вони готові, вони мають певний настрій і
Interesting. 60% show themselves very well in combat. That's not a terribly high ratio.
Бажання воювати. І 60% з них дуже хорошо воюють, підтримують нас, виконують всі поставлені задачі і задають мінімум питань. Тобто ми об'ясняємо, доводимо ціль, мету задачі, що ми робимо, що ми маємо зробити.
Okay, so you can see these guys are doing some fire and maneuver, and if you look, it looks like most of them do have plate carriers with plates in it. Or rather, body armor. It looks like soft body armor with level 4 plates. But you can see they're doing some basic fire and maneuver. Some of them are rocking helmets, some aren't. You know my stance. Helmet good. I want to point out, interesting, 308 Winchester, made in Ukraine. This looks very similar to a M4, at least type of operation, right? With its selector switch here. I'm fascinated by this guy's shooting position. It's not terrible.
Totalmente diferente a la guerra interna que tenemos en Colombia, pues nada comparado, porque aquí hay mucha artillería, nos dan con misiles.
So this is a Colombian guy, and he talks about the guerra interna, which is the internal war within Colombia, or the war against Colombian guerrillas. So it's tough to say. I imagine he's is saying, oh, it's totally different. And you probably, I guess if you never fought in that war, you may or may not draw the comparison, but this is an example of somebody who's, again, coming from a very different war to a very conventional hot war.
Racismo, y pues es totalmente diferente. Y pues ahí le estamos dando, pues tratando de sobrevivir y tratando de sacar a los rusos de acá, de Ucrania.
Again, you can see it looks like there's different levels of proficiency. This guy looks like he's actually fairly proficient, as does this guy. Again, if you're wearing your body armor and your helmet, to me that says right away you've got a little bit of knowledge about what you're doing. And this is a fairly good kneeling firing position. You can see actually this individual is using his elbow and knee connected to give it additional stability. This is something that you would be expected from like a NATO trainer to tell you. But this guy seems pretty confident with his weapon. Okay, this individual seems less competent because you may notice that he's shooting from a kneeling position, sure, but look at his stance. He's standing in a way that is, his chest is perpendicular with the target, right? The target is obviously along the barrel, but his shoulders, his chest is facing this way. And this is actually how you were trained to shoot before body armor, when you wanted to present the smallest silhouette possible for your to your enemy. Now, in the days of body armor, you guys can see, look at how, especially if he doesn't have side plates, look at how, if your target is shooting back, do you see how these plates will provide no protection? Instead of having the broad side of the plate, you have the narrow side. It doesn't mean he's untrained. It just means he was trained from doctrine or from an era that lacks body armor. You can see here, he looks like the Colombian flag and Ukrainian flag. You can see blue, white, blue, and that is generally the Colombian flag. But flag. Oh no, I'm sorry. I think it's let's see, white, blue flag. Interesting. I have it wrong. It looks like. Ooh, Argentina. There you go. Okay, it looks like an Argentine flag. Also very interesting. Yeah, so there's that. And then you can see here, yeah, it looks about right. You can see there's something going on in the center there. I think it's an Argentine flag. Okay, here you've got Ukraine, Brazil, Ukraine. Okay, this guy has an AK tattoo. This is interesting because the AK is not the standard issue sidearm of the Brazilian military, or excuse me, the primary individual weapon of the Brazilian military. Standard issue rifle. There we go. Is actually the IMBEL MD series. Let's see if we can get a picture. And yeah, that's what they're trained on. So this is really interesting because who does use these weapons in Brazil are often organized crime, particularly drug trafficking organizations. He also seems not that confident.
São batalhas sangrentas.
You can also see here, he's not really wearing his helmet properly. It looks really, really uncomfortable. Like nothing about the way he's wearing that chin strap looks even remotely comfortable. So it says to me either this guy doesn't really wear the helmet that often, but you see other people also don't wear their helmets. So it makes me think that maybe this is somebody who's, I'm trying to think of a nice way of putting it, whose experience is not with a conventional military.
Muitos companheiros se machucam, mas tem uns que se recuperaram rápido, mas estamos persistindo, persistindo, estamos vencendo. Cada etapa, cada pedaço que a gente ganha, cada centímetro que a gente ganha é uma vitória.
Okay, you can see here, this looks like Spain, but you can see this guy's got an Argentine, Brazilian flag, armed forces of the Ukraine. I think this is Cuba, Spain. So this looks like maybe some sort of commander or officer. See, he's got an armed forces of Ukraine patch. This guy actually looks like, yeah, he looks like someone who's probably was an active duty Colombian service member. Probably did fight in the war.
No sé, pero.
Okay, these are some interesting patches. You could see, it's tough to see, but they look like they might be morale patches.
Toda la gente que vinieron de Afganistán, de Irak, de Colombia, de donde sea, ni uno de ellos no lo vieron.
Okay, I want to point out that this guy speaks Spanish with a pretty thick accent. But what's even more interesting is this patch. And this patch is a kind of a weird one, right? Because, and here I'll pull up the Wikipedia article. You guys can see it's, we'll generously call it problematic. It's from a, I'm going to try not to get demonetized. It's from a World War II belligerent. And it was co-opted by people who are fans of of a particular World War II belligerent. It was designed specifically as part of a bad guy's renovation of a castle. It was, of course, it's since been widely used by some bad people, including people that did some bad things, even in the recent era. You guys could see on here, right? The bad guy, the guy who did the bad thing in New Zealand, and then later, even last year, the guy who did the bad thing in Buffalo, New York, both wore the symbol and prominently displayed it. But what's interesting is that Ukraine's Azov regiment also incorporated the symbol. But one person, at least one political scientist, argues that actually it's now become lost on most people in Ukraine because of its association with Azov. They see it as a symbol of a successful fighting unit that protects Ukraine, which is what the Azov regiment did in 2014, right? The actual country was in disarray, and so Azov, at the time not affiliated with the Ukraine government, just simply took up arms and went to fight the Russian separatists. So that brand, so this may be his way of saying, this commander's way of saying, hey, I served with Azov potentially in the battle days of 2014. But it's tough to know if it's an ideology, how idealized it is. And how do I feel about this? I try my best to withhold judgment from different cultures. There's one thing Afghanistan taught me. It's that you can't take your Western perspectives and transplant them onto another country. That said, if I was one of these Colombian soldiers and I saw that my commander had that symbol, I would worry a bit.
Una guerra así, ni uno. Con tanta precisión de artillería, de tanta precisión de gente, drones. No es fácil, no es fácil. Acá se juega mucho la cabeza, mentalmente hay que jugar muy bien acá, porque si no, si no te acostumbras a que se te caen cada rato las bombas, te vas a tu casa rápido porque no aguantas.
And I want to point something out that a lot of these guys indicate that they, in the interviews, that they have experience with this regiment, that they have served in combat, and yet they're still out here training, growing in proficiency. I believe part of this is just good practice, right? If you spend a month in a trench line digging in against artillery, it's easy to have your skills atrophy if you haven't gone on the offensive in a while. And these opportunities represent good chances for senior soldiers to impart their skills on more junior members. When I was deployed, we would routinely run rangers not unlike this, somewhat informal with proper safety precautions taken. And you guys can see they're in a low-lying area, so that they're shooting in hillsides everywhere, and there's no, civilians around.
Бойовий настрій готові. Ми дивимося в очі, ми проводимо інструктаж, проводимо співбесіду попередньо і беремо їх з підписом контракту, відповідним юридичним оформленням, і вони служать у нас. Після прибуття в підрозділ ми проводимо свого роду злагодження. Його назвати злагодженням не можна, але в нас є люди, які, є спеціалісти, які володіють стандартами НАТО, знають процедури НАТО, тому ми легко.
Yeah, this is interesting, right? And it's a real problem. If you are from a non-NATO military, there's a reason why many of these NATO standard operating procedures exists for exactly these sort of reasons, is so that you can take disparate soldiers, disparate companies, disparate battalions that may not even share necessarily a common language, and you could put them in the fight with each other. If you are a veteran of this channel, you might remember I actually did a cover of, or a breakdown of, a Portuguese unit serving in, I believe it was Mali. And what was fascinating about this Portuguese unit is that when they talked to their close air support, they switched to English. And the reason, and they followed NATO standard communication procedures. And it was fascinating because the helicopter was probably French, was what many of the commenters said. And so it would allow this Portuguese paratroopers to liaise conduct close air support, which is a delicate operation that requires serious training. And they were able to do so successfully in English, in another language. But that's the power of training to a NATO standard.
В тому числі я, тому ми легко знаходимо спільну мову і втягуємо їх в підрозділ, ставимо бойові задачі і разом спільно з ними виконуємо.
Okay, I want to point out he's got a not filled camelback and this butt pack, which is a good call. He's got his IFAC or medical kit. But it is kind of interesting to see him go full auto with what's not a machine gun. It's or maybe it's an RPK. I don't think so, though. I think this is the barrel of a 74.
Чому вони в нас? Тому що процедура оформлення в нас більш спрощена була, так як це був добровольчий батальйон. Далі, коли ми перейшли і стали підрозділом ЗСУ, ця процедура також трошки адаптувалась, що дозволило нам короткий срок.
Right. So what he's describing here, according to their article, was that they originally were the armed wing of a political party in June 2014, the Carpathian Battalion, and that they, like the Azov unit, were formed at the start of the war in Donbass and fighting against pro-Russian separatists. They were originally composed, because they're a special police unit, expressly they are a counterinsurgent unit, right? Able to do patrols, intel gathering, targeted raids, that sort of thing. And of course, as a police unit, right, though Ukraine's been trying to crack down, they've banned, for example, political parties from having militaries, which is probably just a good call. And the unit has seen considerable action fighting in the battle for Kiev, then was redeployed to eastern Ukraine, fought in the Battle of Kharkiv, the Kharkiv counteroffensive. Their previous commander was killed in Izium and is now commanded by, I think, this guy, codenamed SWAT. And they, again, have been essential in the liberation of Izium and Lyman, and have taken a settlement to the east, a series of dams, and more settlements in northern Donetsk. So a really interesting history to a unit.
Оформити їх юридично, офіційно, дати їм права, такі як нашим воякам, і успішно виконувати завдання без всяких проблем.
Okay, the guy who has the full mask. Listen, one of the other rumors here is that some organized crime elements, drug trafficking organizations and the like, there are rumors that they are actually deliberately sending some of their sicarios, particularly in South America, foot soldiers, to gain combat experience in Ukraine and then come back and teach it to other members of this organized crime organization. Something very similar was rumored to have happened where soldiers with dual citizenship in Mexico and the US, some of them were either recruited, Mexican Americans were recruited coming out of the military by drug trafficking organizations who said, hey, we heard you served in Iraq and Afghanistan. We'll pay you basically to be a consultant for us as DTOs. You also, again, there are rumors that there were some people who were said, hey, we know you want to be a Sicario, but you have a clean record and you have U.S. citizenship. We want you to join the military, and we want you to get as much light infantry training as you can and as much combat experience as you can, expressly to come back in 3, 4, or 5 years and train up the other members of this organized crime element. They are primarily rumors. But that was a fascinating look at a unit that sometimes we don't think about from countries that we often don't think about. Anyway, guys, that's all I had, and I will see you all in the next one. Definitely check out the Patreon. Thanks to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible. Catch y'all in the next one.